240 people packed into the hottest jazz club in New York. Duke Ellington's orchestra swinging on stage. Champagne flowing, laughter echoing off the walls, women in silk dresses, men in tailored suits, the air thick with cigarette smoke and expensive perfume. This was Harlem at its peak. This was black excellence on full display. But in the back corner, at table 14, Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson sat perfectly still. Ice in his glass hadn't moved in 20 minutes. His eyes locked on one man across the room, watching, calculating, waiting. Marcus St. Williams, the man who saved Bumpy's life in 1953, the man Bumpy called brother, the man who'd taken 3 bullets meant for Bumpy in the Lenox Lounge ambush, the man Bumpy trusted more than anyone outside his own wife, the man who, 3 hours earlier, had walked into Vincent Gigante's social club in Little Italy and walked out with an envelope containing $15,000 in blood money. Bumpy knew because he'd had Saint followed for 6 weeks. Every move, every meeting, every conversation. Bumpy had watched his brother become a traitor in slow motion. Tonight, after 8 years of brotherhood, after everything they'd been through together, after all the loyalty and love and protection, tonight was the night Harlem would learn what happens when you betray the godfather of Harlem. What happened in the next 4 hours didn't just end one man's life. It created a legend. It established a code. It sent a message that echoed through every street corner, every numbers joint, every policy bank in Harlem. A message so powerful that 60 years later, old men still tell the story in barbershops and corner stores, still whisper the name Marcus St. Williams as a warning to anyone thinking about crossing loyalty's line. Because Bumpy Johnson didn't just punish betrayal, he made it a public execution of trust itself. He turned one man's mistake into a citywide lesson about the cost of disloyalty. This is the true story the history books won't tell you. This is the night that changed Harlem forever. This is the night that made loyalty more valuable than money, more sacred than blood, more powerful than fear. This is the night Marcus St. Williams learned that some debts can never be repaid. Let's go back to where this brotherhood started, because you can't understand the depth of the betrayal without understanding how deep the bond went. You can't comprehend the severity of the punishment without knowing what was lost. You can't judge what Bumpy did unless you know what Saint meant to him. October 7th, 1953, Lenox Lounge, Lenox Avenue and 125th Street. Bumpy Johnson walked into the Lenox Lounge at 11:45 p.m. Thursday night. The place was packed, 300 people, live band playing Billie Holiday. The air thick with smoke and possibility. Bumpy was there to meet Fat Tony Salerno from the Genovese family. Routine business, discussing territory lines, numbers operations, keeping the peace between Harlem and Little Italy. Standard diplomatic work. Bumpy wore a charcoal gray suit, black fedora, diamond cufflinks. He moved through the crowd like Moses through the Red Sea. People stepped aside. Men nodded respect. Women smiled. Everyone knew who he was. Everyone understood his power. What Bumpy didn't know was that Anthony the Chin Gigante had sent 8 men to that meeting. Not to talk, not to negotiate, to end Bumpy's reign right there. 8 Italian shooters from the Genovese family, 4 inside the club, 4 outside covering exits. The contract was simple. Bumpy Johnson dies tonight. No negotiation, no warning, just death. The Italians had been planning it for 3 months. They'd bribed the doorman, mapped the exits, studied Bumpy's routines. They knew he came to the Lenox Lounge every Thursday at 11:45. They knew he always sat in the back booth. They knew exactly where to position the shooters for a clean kill. Bumpy was walking toward the back booth, his bodyguard Big Sam 3 steps behind him, when Marcus Williams saw something nobody else saw. Marcus was a young enforcer, only 24 years old, who'd been running numbers for Bumpy for 2 years. Smart kid, quiet, observant. He was standing near the bar when he caught it, a reflection in the mirror behind the bottles, a man's hand moving inside a jacket, the wrong kind of movement, the kind that meant steal. Marcus turned, saw Carlo Gambino's cousin, one of Gigante's button men, standing 15 feet from Bumpy, saw the gun coming out, saw it rising, saw it aimed at the back of Bumpy's head. Carlo had a clear shot, nobody between him and the target, nobody paying attention. It was perfect. Marcus Williams didn't think, didn't calculate odds, didn't weigh his own survival. He just moved, threw himself between Bumpy and that gun, covered the 6 feet in less than 2 seconds. 3 shots fired, boom, boom, boom. All 3 hit Marcus. 1 tore through his shoulder, shattering bone. 1 punctured his left lung, collapsing it instantly. 1 shattered his collarbone, sending fragments into his chest cavity. He went down hard, blood spreading across the hardwood floor like spilled wine. The whole club erupted, women screaming, tables flipping, glasses shattering, Bumpy's men drawing weapons from everywhere. Big Sam put 2 bullets in Carlo before he could fire again. Another shooter went down. The other Italians were backing toward exits, firing wild, trying to retreat. It was chaos, war, thunder inside 4 walls. But Bumpy Johnson wasn't watching the gunfight. He was kneeling beside Marcus Williams in a pool of blood. Marcus was gasping, choking, blood bubbling from his mouth, his eyes wide, scared. He was dying, and he knew it. Bumpy pressed his hand against the chest wound, felt the blood pumping between his fingers, felt the life draining out of this kid who just saved him. And Bumpy Johnson, the man who'd seen hundreds die, the man who'd killed dozens himself, the man who never showed emotion in public, leaned close to Marcus's ear and said 7 words that would define the next 8 years of their relationship. "You just bought yourself a brother, son." Marcus Williams survived. 42 days in Harlem hospital, touch and go for the first week. The doctors said he'd die, said the lung damage was too severe, said the blood loss was fatal, but Bumpy Johnson didn't accept that diagnosis. He brought in Dr. Theodore Jameson from Columbia Presbyterian, a black surgeon who'd trained at Johns Hopkins, the best trauma doctor in New York. Money wasn't an issue. Bumpy paid $20,000 for private care, round-the-clock nurses, experimental antibiotics, whatever it took. Marcus pulled through. By November he was walking. By December he was back on the streets, and when he walked out of that hospital, he walked straight into Bumpy's inner circle. Not as an employee, as family. For 8 years, Marcus St. Williams was untouchable in Harlem. That nickname, Saint, came from the streets, because he'd taken bullets for Bumpy Johnson, because he'd proven loyalty when it mattered most, because he'd chosen death over letting Bumpy die. Bumpy gave him everything. A brownstone on Strivers Row, the nicest block in Harlem, 3 stories. Original woodwork. A house that cost $40,000 in 1954. A house that announced status. Bumpy also gave Saint a piece of 5 different operations, numbers running from 125th to 145th Street, policy bank collections, protection rackets in Sugar Hill. Saint was earning $4,000 a week, more money than most Harlem residents saw in a year. But it wasn't just money, it was respect, access, power. Saint sat at tables where decisions were made. He walked into rooms with Bumpy where politicians, cops, and mob bosses negotiated the future of New York. He had Bumpy's ear. He had Bumpy's trust. He had something more valuable than gold in Harlem. He had Bumpy Johnson's protection. When Saint's mother died in 1957, Bumpy paid for a funeral that had 800 people in attendance. Flowers from every corner of Harlem, a mahogany casket with gold handles, a gospel choir from Abyssinian Baptist Church, a reception at the Savoy Ballroom. Bumpy stood at that funeral and delivered a eulogy for a woman he'd only met twice. Did it because she was Saint's mother. Did it because that's what brothers do. When Saint's sister got married in 1959, Bumpy walked her down the aisle because her father was dead, gave her away to a postal worker from the Bronx, paid for the entire wedding, $15,000, orchestra, open bar, prime rib dinner for 300 guests. Saint cried that day, told Bumpy he could never repay him. Bumpy said, "You already did. October 7th, 1953, you paid in blood. This wasn't business, this was family, this was love. This was the kind of bond that's supposed to be unbreakable." But something happened in 1960. that nobody saw coming, something that would plant the seed of betrayal, something that would set in motion a chain of events that ended with blood in the Harlem River. December 12, 1960. The Cotton Club, 142nd Street and Lenox Avenue. Saint was at the Cotton Club handling a collection dispute Tuesday night. The weekly numbers game had brought in $82,000 from policy bets across Harlem. Should have been smooth. But there was a problem. A runner named Tommy Shoes Romano was short, $37,000 short. Tommy claimed he'd been robbed, said 3 guys jumped him on 8th Avenue and 132nd Street, 9 p.m., said they knew he was carrying, said they took the whole bag, wanted Bumpy to cover the loss, said he'd earned protection by being loyal for 5 years. Saint knew it was bullshit. You don't get robbed of $37,000 in Bumpy's territory without someone hearing about it, without someone seeing something, without word. Getting back. Harlem had eyes everywhere. Nothing happened in those streets without someone knowing. Saint pressed Tommy hard, in front of 20 people at the Cotton Club, made him sweat, made him repeat the story 3 times, caught him in contradictions. Where exactly did it happen? What did the robbers look like? What did they say? How did they know you had the money? Tommy's story fell apart like wet paper. Saint got in his face, grabbed him by the collar, slammed him against the bar, 20 witnesses watching. Saint wasn't just angry about the money, he was angry about the disrespect, about the lie, about Tommy thinking he could play Bumpy Johnson for a fool. Tommy broke, started crying, admitted he'd gambled the money at a Genovese card game in the Bronx. High-stakes poker in Arthur Avenue, lost it all in one night, 26 hands, destroyed. Was too scared to tell Bumpy, thought he could make up a robbery story, thought he could cover it with next week's collections. Here's where it went wrong. Saint should have brought Tommy to Bumpy immediately. That was the rule. That was the code. You don't handle punishment yourself. You bring the problem to Bumpy. Let him decide. Let him weigh the circumstances. Let him deliver justice. But Saint was angry, felt personally disrespected, felt like Tommy had tried to make him look stupid. So he handled it himself, right there, in front of witnesses. Beat Tommy unconscious with a pool cue, 14 hits, broke his jaw, cracked his skull, left him in an alley off 142nd Street bleeding into the gutter. Tommy Shoes Romano never woke up, died from a brain hemorrhage 3 hours later. And Tommy Shoes, the low-level runner who got stupid and gambled away money that wasn't his, happened to be the nephew of Vincent the Chin Gigante, his sister's son. Blood. Gigante didn't care that Tommy was a thief, didn't care that he'd lied, didn't care that he'd gambled away Bumpy's money, didn't care about the circumstances or the justification. He cared about one thing. A black man from Harlem had killed his sister's son, and somebody had to pay. But Gigante couldn't touch Bumpy Johnson. Not directly, not without starting a war that would bring federal heat, not without risking everything his family had built in New York. Bumpy had too many connections, too many cops on payroll, too many politicians in his pocket. Killing Bumpy would bring consequences Gigante couldn't afford, so he went looking for a pressure point, a weakness, a crack in Bumpy's armor. And he found one. He found Marcus St. Williams, the man who'd killed Tommy, the man close enough to Bumpy to have value, the man with something to lose. January 15, 1961, Arthur Avenue, the Bronx. 3 of Gigante's men grabbed Saint outside Rao's restaurant. 2 a.m. Saint was leaving a card game, walking to his car. They came from behind, put a gun to his head, walked him to a black Oldsmobile, drove him to a basement on Arthur Avenue. Gigante was waiting, sitting in a chair, smoking a cigar, no expression, just cold eyes watching Saint get dragged in and thrown into another chair. Gigante spoke first. "You killed my nephew." Saint tried to explain, tried to tell him about the money, about the lie, about how it wasn't personal. Gigante raised his hand. "Shut him up. I don't care. You killed my sister's son. Now I got 3 options for you. Listen careful. Option 1, disappear. Gigante would make it clean. 1 bullet to the head. No suffering. No public spectacle. Saint would just vanish. Body in the Hudson. Nobody finds you. Your sister thinks you ran off. She lives. You die quiet. Option 2, work for me, feed me information about Bumpy, schedules, operations, money, nothing that gets anyone killed, just business intelligence, do it quietly for 6 months, then walk away with $50,000 and my protection. Your debt is paid, you're free. Option 3, refuse both. And Gigante would kill Saint's sister. Her name was Angela. 3 kids, ages 4, 3 and 18 months. Gigante would kill all of them. Slow, make Saint watch. Then kill Saint. Slow, public, humiliating. Make it a message. Gigante let that sink in. Let Saint sit there in that basement understanding his options, understanding he had no good choice, understanding his life had just ended one way or another. Saint chose option 2, not because he wanted to betray Bumpy, but because he had a sister in Harlem with 3 babies, because Gigante had photos of Angela's apartment, her kids' school, her daily routine, because refusal meant watching his family die before they killed him. So Marcus St. Williams became an informant, became a traitor, became the thing he'd never imagined being, and it started slow, small things, things that wouldn't get anyone hurt. For 3 months, he fed Gigante information, what nights Bumpy visited which clubs, which cops were on Bumpy's payroll, what routes the numbers runners used, when shipments came in from the docks, small intelligence, nothing that caused real damage. Things Saint told himself were just survival, just keeping his sister alive, just paying a debt he never asked for. But Gigante wanted more, always more. That's how it works. You give an inch, they take a mile. You start small, they push for bigger. By April, Gigante wanted the crown jewel. He wanted the location of Bumpy's main stash house. The stash house was legendary in Harlem. Everyone knew it existed. Nobody knew where. It was the place where Bumpy kept the money from numbers, policy games, protection rackets, and narcotics distribution. Conservative estimate, $2 million, maybe more. Cash, untraceable. Hidden somewhere in Harlem's 20 square blocks. Only 5 people knew the location. Bumpy, his wife Mamie, his lawyer Jess Hyman, his accountant Morris Levine, and Marcus St. Williams. Bumpy had shown it to Saint in 1956, brought him there to count money after a big week. Told him, "This stays. Between us. This is family business." Gigante offered Saint $15,000 for that address, promised it would be a clean robbery. No violence, nobody gets hurt, just money. Bumpy's insured, he'll recover. He's been robbed before. He'll rebuild. And Saint walks away clean. Family safe, debt paid, freedom. Saint wrestled with it for 2 weeks, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, saw Bumpy every day, looked him in the eye, shook his hand, sat at his table, laughed at his jokes, all while knowing what he was about to do. On April 22, 1961, at 2:30 in the afternoon, Marcus St. Williams walked into Vincent Gigante's social club on Mulberry Street in Little Italy. He walked out 11 minutes later with a white envelope containing $15,000 in cash, and Vincent Gigante had the address of Bumpy Johnson's stash house, 463 West 145th Street, 3rd floor, red door, back entrance through the alley. What Saint didn't know was that Bumpy had suspected him for 6 weeks. What Saint didn't know was that Bumpy had changed that stash house location 4 days earlier. Moved everything to a new location in Sugar Hill, left the old one empty. What Saint didn't know was that the address he gave Gigante now led to an empty apartment that Bumpy had rigged with 6 of his own men waiting inside with shotguns. And what Saint definitely didn't know was that Bumpy Johnson was sitting in the Red Rooster that very night, watching him celebrate, watching him drink champagne and laugh with his girl, watching him think he'd gotten away with it, waiting for the exact right moment to teach Harlem a lesson about loyalty that would echo through generations. April 22, 1961, 11:47 p.m. The Red Rooster Jazz Club. Saint was drunk, celebrating. He thought he'd gotten away with it. Thought he'd paid his debt to Gigante. Thought his sister was safe now. Thought the nightmare was over. Thought he could go back to being Bumpy's brother. Go back to normal. The 15,000 was already hidden in his apartment. His sister didn't know. Nobody knew. He was free. Then he saw Bumpy stand up from table 14. Saint's heart stopped, watched Bumpy adjust his suit jacket, watched him button it, watched him start walking across the club, straight toward him, through the crowd, eyes locked, face expressionless. Saint's stomach dropped, his mouth went dry, his hands started shaking. But he forced a smile, played it cool, extended his hand for their usual handshake, the one they'd been doing for 8 years, brother to brother. Bumpy took his hand, held it, looked him dead in the eyes, and said 6 words that made Saint's blood turn to ice. "Let's take a walk, brother. We need to talk." Saint felt 6 men move in around him, Bumpy's men, not aggressive, not grabbing, just close, surrounding, escorting. The music kept playing, Duke Ellington's orchestra swinging. Nobody in the club noticed anything wrong, just looked like 2 brothers stepping out for a private conversation. Bumpy's hand on Saint's shoulder, friendly, casual, guiding him toward the back exit. They walked through the kitchen, past the cooks, past the dishwashers, out the back door into the alley. The door closed behind them. The music became muffled, and Saint saw what was waiting. A 1959 Cadillac, black, idling, trunk open, and standing beside the car 7 men Saint recognized. Bumpy's inner circle, the real enforcers, the ones who'd been with Bumpy since the 1940s, the ones who didn't talk, the ones who handled the problems that couldn't be handled any other way. Saint's legs almost gave out. He tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to say something, anything. Bumpy raised his hand, cut him off. "Not here, Saint, not yet. Get in the car." They drove in silence, north on 7th Avenue, then east on 155th, then north again on Edgecombe. Saint knew where they were going before they got there. Colonial Park, the place where Bumpy handled business that couldn't be handled anywhere else, the place where problems disappeared. The car stopped near the Harlem River, 2 a.m., nobody around, just the sound of water lapping against concrete, distant traffic on the highway, the city lights reflecting off black water. Bumpy got out, Saint followed. The 7 men formed a circle, and Bumpy finally spoke. "April 22nd, 2:30 p.m. You walked into Gigante's club on Mulberry Street. You walked out 11 minutes later with an envelope. You gave him the address of my stash house. You took $15,000 to betray me." Saint's face went white. He tried to explain, tried to tell Bumpy about Tommy's shoes, about the threats, about his sister, about Gigante's ultimatum, about having no choice. The words came out fast, desperate, pleading. 8 years of brotherhood spilling out in a panicked confession. Bumpy listened, didn't interrupt, didn't react, just stood there, hands in his pockets, face unreadable, listening to every word. When Saint finally stopped talking, when he'd said everything he could say, when his voice broke and tears started rolling down his face, Bumpy nodded slowly. "So you did it to save your sister?" "Yes. You did it because Gigante threatened Angela and her kids." "Yes. You did it because you had no choice." "Yes, Bumpy, I swear. I had no choice. He was going to kill them. He showed me pictures of her apartment, her kids' school. He was going to—" Bumpy raised his hand again. Saint stopped. The silence stretched. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Finally, Bumpy spoke. "You know what's funny, Saint? I believe you. I believe Gigante threatened your sister. I believe you felt trapped. I believe you thought you had no choice." Saint's eyes lit up with hope. "Then you understand. I understand you chose your sister over me. I understand you chose her life over our brotherhood. I understand that when it came down to it, when you had to pick between loyalty and family, you picked family." "Bumpy, please. Here's what—" "You didn't understand, Saint. You could have come to me. You could have told me about Gigante's threat. You could have walked into my house and said, 'Bumpy, we got a problem.' And I would have handled it. I would have moved Angela and her kids, would have put them somewhere Gigante could never find them, would have protected them the same way I protected you for 8 years. You know why? Because that's what brothers do." Saint started crying harder, realized his mistake, realized what he'd done. Bumpy continued, "But you didn't come to me. You didn't trust me to protect your family. You didn't trust that our brotherhood meant I'd move heaven and earth to keep them safe. Instead, you trusted Gigante. You trusted that a man who threatened to murder 3 babies would actually let you walk away after you betrayed me. You trusted the wrong man, Saint. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please, Bumpy, please. You saved my life in 1953, took 3 bullets for me. I never forgot that. I gave you everything because of that. You were my brother. I loved you like blood. But here's the thing about love, Saint. It can't exist without trust, and you broke that trust. Not because Gigante forced you, but because you chose not to come to me first." Bumpy turned to his men, nodded. They grabbed Saint, held him. Saint started screaming, begging. The sound echoed across the water. What happened next took 7 minutes. Bumpy didn't do it himself. He watched. Let his men handle it. When it was over, they put Saint's body in a coffin they'd built earlier that day, a coffin with Saint's name engraved on a brass plate. They sealed it shut, drove it to Vincent Gigante's social club, left it on the sidewalk at 4 a.m. with a note attached. The note said, "This is what betrayal costs. Touch Harlem again and your coffin is next." Gigante found it at 7 a.m., opened it, saw Saint's body, read the note, and for the next 12 years the Genovese family didn't set foot in Harlem. Marcus Saint Williams was never officially found. His sister Angela woke up one morning to find $50,000 in cash on her kitchen table with another note, "Your brother loved you. This is for his nieces and nephew. The debt is paid." Bumpy Johnson never spoke Saint's name again, but everyone else did. For decades the story spread. The man who saved Bumpy's life, the man who betrayed him, the man who ended up in a coffin delivered to the mob. And every hustler, every gangster, every street soldier in Harlem learned the same lesson that night. Loyalty isn't negotiable. It isn't situational. It isn't something you trade for money or safety. It's absolute. It's everything. And if you break it, even for the best reasons, even to save your family, even when you think you have no choice, there's only one price. The same price Marcus St. Williams paid in 1961. This is Harlem. This is Bumpy Johnson. This is the untold legend.